All right, let's do some building today. We have this nice open plot next to the plaza that I framed out that is ready for this massive skyscraper. I was pondering for a little bit over what to do with the skyscraper, as I know I wanted a double layer glass, big kind of monolithic structure to represent this fake corporation that I came up with called AMX. They have two billboards, I believe, around the city, one in the train station and one on the side of the nightclub. But the feature that I'm building out now for this building is this gorgeous curving facade that I was thinking of this building that I'd seen previously, and I honestly couldn't think of where I had seen it from until I realized. So the design of the skyscraper draws from 9 West 57th Street in Manhattan, which is developed by Sheldon Solow, called the Solow Building, and designed by Gordon Bunshaft of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, or SOM. What stands out about this building is the use of the curved facades on two opposing sides, one facing West 57th and the other facing West 58th Street, while the rest of the structure remains relatively rectilinear and highly controlled. 9 West 57th Street was the first major structure in New York City to be developed with a sloped facade. The curve was a creative response to city regulations that required skyscrapers to step back, ensuring the building didn't cast excessive shadows, thus allowing the sunlight to reach the street level, and in this case, the plaza level. The onward slope also creates a unique and kind of dramatic pedestrian portico at the entrance, often described as a canyon-like effect. So the entrance that I have built out here is this cafe that is going to be like the corporate cafe that is open to the public and kind of meant as partial advertisement to the public. Like I said, the actual skyscraper is a corporate tower for this fake corporation, AMX. AMX is structured around a simple but sinister premise. Your body can be their greatest asset, and they will pay you for it. They'll provide you with small upgrades to your cybernetics, even some substantial replacements, and the company absorbs the cost through a deferred claim. Nothing is taken from you while you're alive, but your value, their value, lies in your body becoming more engineered than organic. It's a contract. They upgrade you, and when you pass, they own your body and your data. AMX's system extends beyond the body. Conditions around the city are adjusted so that you may not see them, but they are inescapable. Food offered to the public, like in this cafe or all the vending machines that I have around the city, often for cheap or free, is slowly degrading people. The water, the river, contains magma meant to slowly deal damage to those who dare to cross. And the thornberry bushes across the city are placed very specifically for people to run into. Lord knows I've ran into them plenty of times through building this. Over time, it's meant to make the body reach its limit faster than it otherwise would, an agreement expedited with interruption. An AMX contract holder's body is recovered, stripped of usable components, and reassembled into a standardized form, those friendly copper golems dispersed through the city. The contract holders are utility, defined by what they can do after they've ceased. The copper golem underwriters now manage this execution. They're constructed from recycled parts assembled into functional units. They don't assess or intervene, but they complete what was already set in motion, executing AMX's corporate plan to take over the city and extend beyond its reach. Right now, I'm working on that cafe that I mentioned that, if I'm gonna be honest, I haven't entirely stocked up with food yet. I wanted this cafe to go inside the building as well and be framed by a lobby area. I had a few minor experiences with a corporate tower or corporate skyscraper. As you may know, I'm a college student, so I haven't gotten to the point where I'm working in a big corporate skyscraper like in New York, but I am a reformed architecture student. Part of one of my experiences as an architecture student was being able to visit the KPF office in Manhattan which KPF is another architecture firm. You may know them from Hudson Yards, The Edge, or Summit One Vanderbilt. They built that skyscraper. That's also where I learned a little bit more about having to step back from the sidewalk so that there's sunlight that goes on to the New York roads. I visited their corporate office, and it's really funny because it's an architecture firm that's like a sliver of the city is their lobby. And it's very cold and lacks any sense of humanity in the lobby, as you're literally just meant to swipe a badge to pass through it. And I wanted to take that inspiration and kind of inflict it here and have a little bit more interest with that cafe. Like what I imagine a more touristy skyscraper might be like. So I had this rounded wall that frames out the plaza. And then, of course, I cannot resist. The pale moss is just such a perfect block to be like just kind of like concrete, but of course you're still able to place grass on it. So I've sprinkled out almost everywhere I can, obviously except in the lobby, because in theory they maintain their lobby. And I really like the way that it adds a little bit of greenery into the city without it being like lush per se. It more looks a little bit overgrown. And then there's this greenery strip above that later gets framed out by this kind of corporate bar meeting area. Probably one of my favorite things that I've been doing lately in Minecraft building is layering glass panes on top of glass blocks. It gives this really nice linear element to the building. I think it looks kind of like glass mullions. If you don't know what mullions are, they're the thing that separates panes of windows, especially if you have like a curtain wall of windows. And that's kind of the goal I aim to recreate here. I think it also darkens up the interior quite a bit, and I really don't want the interior to be bright and flooded with light, because not only does that not make that much sense to work in an office, but I also just wanted it to be kind of shrouded in mystery. And I wanted to make this cafe really super inviting, so adding more greenery, adding some framing to it, so the patio is really nice to sit in and talk with people. I think later down the road, I'm gonna stock it up with, I think we have mutton wraps from Farmer's Delight and cabbage rolls. I do have a cabbage roll vending machine in the apartment building that you can see in the corner. But the vending machine will be a little bit of a supplement to what this cafe offers. This will be a little bit more well-rounded. I do want to add like a full menu because I think it's very fun, especially if you're perhaps a little sick of building, to go ahead and stock out the stuff that I've set up everything for already. This is what I was talking about with the glass mullions. I think it's just so nice, and the way the sun shines through it really completes the look of the exterior of the building. It's also a nice 3D element, so the building's not just flat glass. Okay, let's work on the lobby a bit more. I really like how this chiseled deep slate looks. I think it's a very brooding kind of block, and it adds a little bit of depth, especially with SPDR, to the overall look of the place. I also wanted to frame out that cafe as a very nature-loving green cafe. So part of the greenery in this city is the addition of this type of netherroot. I am going to be honest, I don't remember the name, but the blue of the netherroot really helps emphasize the cyberpunkiness and maybe helps reinforce the fact that the greenery here is incidental and not so much on purpose. A lot of these are found in the Twilight Forest. If you've ever played with Terralith and Tectonic, you may know what I'm talking about. So I think it does a really nice job to frame out some foliage that's really small and really short that looks like it's cropping up where it's not supposed to be. For the second layer of this lobby space, I mentioned that I wanted to do kind of a bar, not so much a full-fledged bar because I don't think it really fits in this story of the building, and I did want to recreate the Afterlife, which is a bar from Cyberpunk 2077, in the upper stories of this building. And because it was so egregiously dark, I wanted to add in some glowstone. I feel like glowstone is one of those underutilized light blocks sometimes. I remember back when I was like 8 years old and I used to use it for all of my lighting, but I feel like once we got sea lanterns in the game, the texture and the color of glowstone isn't as utilized anymore, and I've had a ton on hand since when the nether opened up, so I embedded those into the wall with these kind of like climbing footholds, handholds that remind me of a feature you might see in a high-end hotel. I also wanted to stage a little bit more of this cafe as it honestly looked a little bit empty. So adding lanterns and stuff, I really like sea pickles because I think they go really well with the warped wood. And then I later went back and I added more heads to the area. We got custom heads, thankfully, in the server. So I'm going ahead and decorating with those a little bit, but trying not to overkill it. Speaking of the server, if you don't know, I'm actually playing on the Flow SMP, which is a paid server by the YouTuber Flow State. I also obviously have a mod pack linked in the description, which the server runs on. Thankfully, as one of the perks of the server, I had a new member of Cyberpunk, Antarctical, help me capture this guy in a boat, and we were jumping around trying to get him to break the bow that he had in his hand. I wanted to get another one of them, but unfortunately he accidentally got killed in the process. But that's our lobby attendant, Albert. And I'm thinking of adding a bartender up here to bring some more life into the bar. And as I moved upwards, I kept adding floor plates spaced like 3.5 or so blocks to be the office cubicle stories of the buildings. A really long and tedious process, so need not I show it all. But as part of my former idea for this building, I will admit it's not in the final part of this building, I wanted to do a gassed docking station. The issue is I'm very much attached to my Opagast. I love the way that the Opagast resource pack looks, and I think it's so much more friendlier and cuter than the regular Ghast, even though the regular Ghast is cute, I will admit. So the opening in the side of this building was supposed to be a gas docking station, but because the Oppa is so big and isn't like a full solid entity, as it is just a visual resource pack, it was kind of clipping through the building and I had to change my idea quite a bit. So I wound up redoing the floor plates a little bit, as I was originally planning to leave a little bit more space for him. And then it kind of fell through when I got to this story with the bar. So this was going to be where Afterlife went. I might come up with a more original name, but for now we're going to ignore it. The Afterlife is supposed to be like a corpo bar where people go to have meetings or hang out after work. So they can go up from their cubicles over here and have a drink and chill out and dance. And it's also supposed to be a place for the executives to intermingle with the lowly office employees and perhaps pretend like they know about their lowly office workers and perhaps care about them even. I will admit the lower few levels of corporate offices are a little bit messy. There's not a lot of space inside the interior of this building, but I wanted to do the lower levels really done up because you can see them from the neighboring buildings. And I added these TV monitor computer heads. They're computer monitors, technically. And I like the way that it turned out with the staging of a few extra lanterns and then a few extra flower pots. And then I went ahead to do it to the third story, technically the fourth story, fifth story, close enough. But this was another one of the stories that you could see from buildings, and I didn't want it to look too empty. I didn't finish all of the floors off because part of me thinks that I might come back later and make them into more automatic farms, as you can see that I did in the end. I do have a very good idea to do like a corporate boardroom, and then maybe in the topmost floor, I do like the executive office suite. I'm honestly really loving how the crimson wood turned out. I don't think I have ever used crimson wood in Minecraft before, like, at all. And I've honestly avoided it. I don't love... Okay, well, I didn't used to love the shade of, like, purplish pink magenta going on, but it's growing on me. I really like the coloring. It's very vibrant. It's not, like, too clawing your eyes out vibrant, like maybe the magenta glazed terracotta is. And then, of course, just to be bougie, I sprinkled some diamonds in the floor. I think this looks so good with the overlays mod. I honestly could not survive without the overlays, like, resource pack mod. It is a combination, I believe, with continuity, and it overlaps nearby textures with each other for certain blocks. And just the way that the diamond ore seamlessly integrates into the floor is a really nice way to kind of give the impression of a dance floor without going full-on crazy with frog lights. I think frog lights might be a little bit too much. And I didn't 100% like the redstone lamps that I used in the other club that I have going on. And then the firefly bushes up here are mainly just for decoration. I really like the particles they give off, and they feel very whimsical, and I don't know if I would say they feel nightclubish, but I think they give off that vibe of like hazy, smoky air. And I made all of the lighting in here either end rods or soul fire to emphasize that afterlife effect, and the blue just goes really well with the flooring. This might be another one of those places where I add in a villager. It's just going to be really annoying to do it later on, so we'll see if that actually ends up happening.
I don't know if I think that there's scaffolding somewhere that I've used for building that I left that I can take back. Yeah.
I gave you a
Lots of-
full stack instead of half.
What'd you say? Sorry.
I gave you a full stack instead of half.
I mean, here, let me... Wait, I need a flashlight. I can't find where mine... Oh, here we go.
As I had more visitors in the city, I kept being told that the building wasn't tall enough, which honestly my worst fear to hear. I have never built a building this tall, and I'm sure if you remember, biotech in the back. At the time, I said that was the tallest, maybe not the tallest, but the largest building that I had made. That has since now been a beaten record by the AMX corporate tower. I went through so much andesite and so much tinted glass doing this. The worst part is I didn't have a fortune pickaxe through this whole thing, so I couldn't use fortune on any of the amethyst shards that I needed for the glass. But I kept running out of glass itself and not even the amethyst shards. So I kept tapering the building as I went up to kind of follow that solo building and just Manhattan building codes that don't allow for building shadows to encroach on the ground too much. I also knew that it meant the more I tapered the building, the less materials it would be in the end. I do kind of wish I've kept the building a little bit larger because, as you'll see very shortly, I added a pale moss farm because I was going through so much of it. I honestly was struggling on some space for that pale moss farm. I think in the end it turned out fine, but it's a little bit janky and has a little bit of visual effect on the exterior of the building. As I kept building this massive tower, I kept thinking of my time as an intern over the summer and how much that turned me off from wanting to work a corporate job. I think there is a way of moving through your life where everything is in place, yet very little of it actually registers. You wake up at a reasonable time, you go where you're meant to go, you complete what's in front of you, you speak to people, you respond, you keep pace. From the outside, it seems like stability, but from the inside, it can feel like the day is happening in front of you rather than with you. Then it ends. And there's nothing wrong with it, but there's also very little you can point to and say you were fully present for. I think that state is easy to fall into because it doesn't feel like a problem. I noticed it more clearly over the summer when I was interning, as it was my first internship in a corporate environment. And I went into it with a fairly open mind. I wasn't expecting anything insane, but I wasn't expecting to feel so detached either. The structure was consistent, and the interns around me were good to be around, but there wasn't anything that made the experience objectively bad. However, there was a distance between what I was doing and how I felt about doing it. Part of that might be personal. I don't respond particularly well to rigid structures. Part of it might have been that specific environment. But beyond that, there's something about repetition that can flatten your experience of time if you don't actively interrupt it. The days begin to resemble each other. And once that happens, they stop standing out. What kept that from happening entirely were the things I chose to do outside of that structure. I was interning in the Philly area, so I spent some time exploring without much of a plan. I went line dancing every single Wednesday, which wasn't something I had the chance to do regularly back at college. And on weekends, I would drive out, sometimes through PA, sometimes further, like New York or Virginia, to visit friends or to go back to my college town. Those moments really stood out to me because I was involved in them. I can recall them even now in great detail. They had shape. If I hadn't done that, I think that entire summer could have compressed into something indistinct. A stretch of time that passed cleanly, without friction, and without much imprint. Because it's not about one job or one season, it's about how easily time can pass without you deciding what you want to do with it. You don't need to make a mistake for that to happen. You can be doing exactly what is expected of you and still arrive at a place where very little feels like it belongs to you. I recently rewatched the Kung Fu Panda series, and a thread in the movies that keeps coming back in different forms is kind of along the lines of that. Po spends a lot of time looking for something that will explain his pace in the world. Something external that will confirm that he's meant to be where he is. What he eventually understands is that there isn't a separate answer waiting somewhere else. There isn't a moment where everything suddenly becomes clear because he found the right thing or his purpose, whatever that's supposed to mean. It comes down to how he engages with what's already in front of him. There's a tendency we have to assume that meaning comes from skill, that it has to be tied to something monumental, something that separates one moment from everything else. That expectation makes it easy to overlook most of what actually makes up life, because most of it is made up of things that don't present themselves as important. You're driving somewhere, you're sitting with a coffee, you're cooking, you're in conversation. These are not rare experiences. They repeat. And because they repeat, they become easy to move through without attention. But repetition doesn't make them insignificant. It just makes them easier to ignore. There's a difference between doing something and being present while you're doing it. The action can be identical, but the experience isn't. At the same time, there's something incomplete about staying entirely within that rhythm. You can learn to pay attention to what's already there, but there's also value in choosing to step outside of it, even in ways that don't carry any obvious reason. Driving somewhere pretty without needing a mission, sitting by a lake and getting lemonade when it's sunny, getting ice cream and spending time with your friends. They're small decisions, but they interrupt the pattern. That contrast is often what allows you to feel the difference between living and being alive. Starting this channel came from a similar place. I grew up watching Aya's Cupquake and dreaming of being a famous Minecraft YouTuber, but at some point, I just stopped thinking about it. It's very easy to get stuck in the mentality of go to school, get an office job, live like everyone else. Then there was a moment where it became obvious that there wasn't anything stopping me from starting a YouTube. It was just a matter of deciding to do it. There's a quote from Timothée Chalamet that I think captures this mentality really well. Life is coming from you, not at you. It's common to feel like your experience is shaped entirely by what's happening around you. Your schedule, your responsibilities, the structure you're in. Those things set conditions, but within those conditions, there's still a degree of authorship. The same set of circumstances can be experienced in different ways depending on how you approach them. You can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. You can't control the wind, but you can angle your sails. The conditions remain, right? You have to make money and feed yourself and do your laundry, but your relationship to the routine can change. There's also a practical side to this that gets overlooked. It's easy to reduce the conversation to extremes. Either you break away entirely and do something completely different, or you accept the structure you're in without question. Most people are somewhere in the middle, working within a structure while trying to do something that feels like them. That's where most of your life actually happens. It's possible to let entire stretches of time pass without any intention. For most, there isn't a clear point where you can say life started. It's just a series of days that don't quite separate from each other. But my point is, it also is possible to interrupt that pattern without changing everything at once. Sometimes that looks like starting something you've been putting off, like Minecraft YouTube. Sometimes it looks like paying attention to something you would normally overlook. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing to go somewhere you don't usually go. The scale of the action isn't what determines its impact, it's the fact that it was chosen. Life doesn't need to be extraordinary to be experienced fully. Most of it won't be. But it does require some level of participation. Without that, it becomes something you move through rather than something you engage with. There's a finite amount of time available to you. And time doesn't always present itself as limited in any obvious way. It just continues for you until it doesn't. That makes it easy to assume there will always be more time later for the things you haven't started yet, or the experiences you haven't allowed yourself to have. And once you recognize that time will pass, whether you do what you've always wanted to or not, the question becomes less about changing everything and more about deciding where you want to place your attention, your effort, and your intention within what already exists.